Welcome to Eye on the Illini. This is Mike Cagley. We've got another big game this week. Illinois coming off of the surprise victory, upsetting number 19, or I should say then number 19, Kansas last week. Now it's Central Michigan Chippewas that stand in front of the Illini. And we're very fortunate. We have Adam Jaksa, and he is the voice of the Chippewas, and he is also the broadcaster for the Lansing Lugnuts. So a true Michigander is going to be on the phone and he's kind enough to come on and give us a preview of what the Illini are going to be facing. Adam, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm looking forward to making my first trip to Champaign. It's weird being from the Midwest. I've never been there before.
Champagne's a fantastic place to visit. As somebody who grew up in Mahomet, I look at that area, Champaign, Mahomet, as home. And I think you'll really enjoy it, especially getting to come to campus at the 100th year anniversary of Memorial Stadium should be a lot of fun. As we move forward to the Chippewas, what the heck happened in that game against Florida International?
Yeah, the final score took me by surprise. I would say rough, I think is how you described it, is a complete understatement. I would say humbly, it was embarrassing. CMU was favored by as many as 7 points going into that game. FIU is a program that hasn't even been alive for more than 25 years. They have won 4 games the last 2 years. They were 1-11 in Butch Davis's last year. And Central Michigan, I know Illinois folks probably aren't up to speed on CMU and Maction, totally understandable, but this is one of the better football programs in the MAC. And they're coming into a season right now where they've had back-to-back losing seasons. And then it hasn't happened since former Michigan State quarterback Dan Enos's first 2 years back in 2010, 2011. So there's a lot of boiled blood kind of going on right now up here in Mount Pleasant, and there's pressure certainly every year. As you guys understand, it's the same thing in year 4 coming up here for Brett Bielema. People want to win, and they just didn't look ready to go. I mean, they turned the ball over 6 times. They had 10 penalties in the game. It's our first look, the first couple of games under Joe Labus, the third string quarterback at Iowa that transferred over this year, and he looked great. Week 1, I know it's FCS, but still they put up 66 points and he looked in complete control, but they just looked shell-shocked on the road. It was hot. It was 90 degrees. It was 100 for the real feel down there in Miami. But this team said it all week long. We're not afraid of the heat. We're ready to go on the road and face adversity, and they really just crumbled. I mean, it was 28-0 in the blink of an eye, and it wasn't FIU. It was simply CMU making mistakes and turning the football over. They had 2 interceptions in the first half. They had a muff punt, and those all turned into points. So before you could even get settled into your second game, you're down 28-0. It's 28-8 at halftime, and you have some momentum early in the third quarter, and then another interception. So what you're hoping is that all of this happened in one game and maybe you got it out of your system. It's hard to say if you don't turn the football over, it would have been a much different game, but that's the truth. There were 6 turnovers and they give FIU a ton of credit. They cashed them all in for touchdowns. So I think it's one of those just burn the film and learn from your mistakes. And hopefully you come in and can play much sounder football against obviously a much better opponent this week in a much more hostile environment. But yeah, last week was it caught all of us by surprise after, again, an FCS opponent in week 1, but a week 1 that people were really, really looking forward to this second week challenge. And I don't think anybody saw a 36-point loss to a program that has not won a ton of games over the last few years.
Yes, and I was surprised by the result as well. Did not expect a game that was so one-sided. When you look at Joe Labus at quarterback for the Chippewas, what does he bring to the table? What type of quarterback is he? Are there things he likes to do? Can you tell us a little bit more about him as a QB?
Yeah, I think it's similar to any quarterback when he's got a clean pocket. He's got great accuracy. And we saw that week 1. Again, Central Connecticut State, they didn't get a lot of pressure. It almost looked like it was 7-on-7 out there. But That's different than what CMU has seen. Last year, Bert Emanuel Jr. is technically the backup quarterback, but he's been injured the first couple of weeks. He struggled to throw the football last year. He's a very athletic guy, didn't get recruited to play quarterback besides CMU out of high school. People wanted him for wide receiver, tight end, because that's what his dad did in the league. So to see Joe Labish in fall camp and then come out and sling it around like he did against Central Connecticut State, that's why it was, I know it's FCS, but here's a quarterback that looks comfortable in the pocket. He's making his throws to accurate targets, hitting slants, hitting comebacks, hitting the deep ball, and he can sling it. I mean, he still made some nice throws in that game against FIU, but for whatever reason, he just made a lot of mistakes, and they just kept coming at him. And I think it got deeper into the game. You got behind. You understand how it is. That kind of takes away the balance. And Jim McElwain, when his offenses and his teams have had success, you go back to 2019, great turnaround. They go to the MAC championship game. 2021, they're a botch snap away from going back to the MAC championship game. Those years, the teams were very balanced. Well, you can't run the football necessarily a ton when you're down so much in a football game and you're trying to come back. So he needs he needs the balance. You need to be able to run the football. I don't know if he's a quarterback proven yet, because that was only his third collegiate start. If you remember, I mean, he started the Music City Bowl for the Hawkeyes in 2022. They beat Kentucky. That's the only game he played for Kirk Ferentz at Iowa. So he was making just his third collegiate start. I think there's still an element of, hey, he's got to get back in the groove and remember how to do this thing again, you know? So I think certainly you're going to see a guy that can throw the ball. There's a little bit of movement. His pocket presence is good, but as we saw for the first time last week, he's got to avoid making the mistakes because certainly Central Michigan showed you they could not afford to make mistakes against FIU. They certainly can't afford to make them against what presumes to be eventually a top 25 team here in Illinois.
We certainly are hoping that they're going to be a top 25 team here in Illinois. Now, when it comes to running the ball, what does Central Michigan have in the backfield in terms of running backs, and what types of backs are they?
Yeah, you got two backs. Predominantly, they're the M&M boys, Marion Lukes and Miles Bailey, best of friends, two different runners. They'll call each other Thunder and Lightning. The Thunder part of that is Miles Bailey. He's a bigger back, will run through you, but he's also got some quicks to him. And then Marion Lukes is he's more of the Lightning. He's going to juke you. He's going to outrun you. Marion didn't play in week 1 with a little bit of a nagging injury. He played and started this past week, but I think there was some rust there because he didn't quite look himself. And he's dynamic. He's been returning kickoffs the last couple of years. He's taken a couple of kickoffs back for touchdown. He didn't look as comfortable back there. He had a couple of decent returns because there were a lot of opportunities with all the points that FIU had in that game. They kicked off a lot. But when he was in the backfield, he didn't seize the hole as much as we've seen in the past. It was Miles Bailey that looked a little bit more comfortable. So those are your two mainstays. When they're going well, they complement each other well. And they are two, arguably, if they're getting blocks and they're hitting the hole, they're a couple of the better backs in the MAC. And then you've got BJ Harris. He's a third string guy. He's a second year transfer from Missouri. A little bit more of a power running back. You can see him maybe sometimes on shorter down situations or to spell those two. And then you get into the fourth back is Nari Biggins. He's got quicks. He was a defensive back last year, and then he moved to running back this year. And I've been impressed. He's played in both games. He made the switch. We saw him in fall camp, and he's shifty, and he's fun to watch. He played a little quarterback and wide receiver in high school, so he's accustomed to that. So you're talking about a position group outside of the linebackers on Central Michigan. That's probably the running backs, the deepest part of this Chippewa team.
And they're running behind an offensive line that, how would you best describe that O line for Illini fans who really, Illinois did not look great against Kansas with either the offensive or defensive line?
Yeah, just from what I've watched and heard with Illinois and kind of their, I know Brett Bielema, they've always
Yeah.
been known for running the football wherever he goes. That kind of inconsistency and wanting more, I think, is how CMU fans are feeling through the first couple of weeks. I mean, you go back to 2021, their last really good season. where they had the leading rusher in the country and Lou Nichols, they were able to rush the football, but they have not been able to rush it consistently since then. And CMU really, their O-line U in the Mid-American Conference. I mean, they continue to churn out NFL offensive linemen, and they've got pieces that are back. I mean, you got Braden Sword out, who's a potential NFL guy. He's their right tackle. He's been there for the last couple of years as the starter. Dominic Serapiglia is a second-year transfer that's at center that came in, and he's done a great job of leading. And then they've got Davis Heinzen also. Those are two guys that got great experience in the Sun Bowl that they won in 2021 after two draft picks were selected, the tackles that got taken after that season. So there's pieces, but they have not consistently been able to run the football. Now, first week, what Central Connecticut State saw on film last year was CMU not being able to throw the ball. So they stacked the box and CMU just threw all over them because they didn't respect the arm of Joe Labus. They'd never seen him. Understandable. Last week, we saw some pieces. We saw some chunks, but we didn't see a ton of explosive plays on either side, passing or running. So I think we're waiting to see because there's expectations for this offensive line to be really dominant. They had a really physical fall camp. That was their main focus because when they've been physical up front, both offensively and defensively, as you know, football starting up front, they've been great. But through the first 2 weeks, again, I think there's been some inconsistencies, but I think there is an ability for them to put it together. Will it happen against Illinois? I don't know, but certainly it looks on paper to be one of their strengths, but we haven't quite seen that in the run game yet.
This is an interesting team because, and it's not an attack on the coaching staff here, but through the first 2 weeks, they have got results that are less than the sum of their parts when you look at what this team should be able to do. Now, it's a long season. There's 10 more games left, so that there's time to fix things. And Illinois is looking at the same thing in terms of improving their line play as well. When you look at the wide receiving core and the tight ends, is there any receivers out there that stand out that look like a go-to player, or is this more of an opportunity to spread the ball out? When you look at the number of receivers who ended up getting the ball, 10 or 11 receivers, they were doing a nice job of getting it to everybody.
Yeah, there's a few good options. Honestly, the wide receivers has been a weakness the last couple of years, but I think they did a really good job in developing the wide receivers coming back. And then they also added a couple pieces. I mean, Solomon Davis is a first-year transfer from Valpo. He lit it up for them, and he's come in. They've been looking for that pop the top type of wide receiver to have the breakaway speed and keep the defense honest and have the long ball. He had a 72-yard touchdown in that first game. Chris Parker had a deep catch in this last game against FIU, more of a possession type, one of their leaders from a year ago. And then Evan Boyd is a big, more possession style guy. He's their biggest guy at 6'3". He's a redshirt freshman raw, but they really like his ability to go get the ball. And then Stephon Bracey is another guy that has good quicks. He's a transfer from Wisconsin. He dropped a lot of balls last year, didn't really seem comfortable in his first year transferring. He looks like a completely different player this year. So those are 3 or 4 guys right there. And then you still have Jordan Williams and Jesse Pruitt the third that have contributed as well. So not to just throw everybody at you, but we've seen guys make catches, and this is a deeper room than we've seen the last couple of years. So I think still being 2 games in, we're still trying to figure out who the go-to guys are, but there's definitely a lot more options than what we've seen last year and in 2022.
Illinois is going to come at them. I would assume they're going to, after seeing the 5 interception game, probably see what kind of pressure they can put on Labus and then see how he responds to it. You had an opportunity to look at the defense. It's not fair to judge a defense based on multiple turnovers. Obviously, in a best case scenario, you turn the ball over, the defense stops the opponent, and then the game continues. That's a lot easier to describe than actually do. How is that defense, understanding that they were put in quite a place with 5 interceptions and a fumble? It's hard to excel as a defense when that's going on.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, and it felt like, too, at the end of the game, they were just worn down. They had been on the field for so long. Um, so I thought they did a good job early in that game before the turnovers started to pile up of facing short fields and forcing punts or making FIU earn it. Because again, the Panthers didn't have this like huge offensive attack either. They just, they got turnovers. Their defense made plays. Give them credit, and put their offense in fortunate situations. But I thought the defense, they played admirably. They couldn't make a couple more stops that I'm sure they would have liked to on some of those short possession interceptions or the fumble. But the big thing with this defense, something that you guys are celebrating after getting 4 turnovers this past week, CMU has not been able to take the football away. And this has been a 2-year trend here. They got a pick 6 in week 1, and they won the turnover battle 1-0, but then they lost it 6-0 this past week. They forced just 10 turnovers a couple of years ago. They forced just 8 turnovers last year. So that has been a stress in the offseason. Can you get some turnovers? Can you force teams to make mistakes? Can you win the turnover battle? And through 2 games, we're looking at the same type of thing we saw the last couple of years. Now, again, that's a small sample size after a really, really just bad performance altogether, which again, you flush that one away and hope that that's a misnomer. But the big thing why they've struggled the last couple of years defensively, because Rob Akey is more of a pressure type of defensive coordinator. He's been here 6 years, all 6 with Coach McElwain. When they get pressure up front, when they get a couple defensive linemen that can disrupt and not just sack the quarterback, but just get to the quarterback, get some pressure, make him make a bad throw, their defense has been much better. When they can't get pressure and their defensive line is unable to get to the quarterback and their DBs are hung out on islands, they've struggled. That's where they've gotten hit big for some big plays. So as it will be for Illinois against Altmaier and the rest of the season, can they find a way to get pressure up front? Because they've got returners there, and we've talked about it. They've got great depth at the linebacker position, and they have a couple of nice pieces at DB, including a captain and All-Mac honoree and Dante Kent. But we haven't seen the turnovers, and it's tough to learn a lot from an FCS blowout, a team you're at home and you were completely overmatched. They were overmatched. And then last week, I mean, there's a million turnovers, and it just was really tough to judge them. So even though that this is a stiffer challenge, I think we're going to learn a lot more about the defense this week and the coming weeks to see what this unit will look like in 2024.
And for those who are tuning in from an Illini standpoint, do they have any standouts on the defensive line that you would say are notable? And are they willing to do the blitz game if you can't get there from the defensive line rushing?
Yeah, I would say Michael Heldman is probably your number one guy. He's the defensive end, a redshirt junior out of Romeo. He's got a great motor. Just has continued to get better and better in this program. And so far through the first couple of games as well, Jonah Pace and Jason Williams, other guys that have been here, 3 juniors right across the board that have been here and they've made an impact. Jonah Pace had a sack last game. Jason Williams, a chance to go back to Florida, has had an impact and gotten in the backfield a couple of times. But again, I understand following Big Ten football, what kind of offensive lines Brett Bielema has at Wisconsin and then at Arkansas, and now trying to get things righted in the correct direction at Illinois. So this is going to be a stiffer test, but those are the guys you're leaning on. And to answer your question about the pressure, yes, I think they'll try, but I don't know how much you can pressure a team that obviously is out of the Big Ten. They're going to have some great athletes, and CMU is going to have to find ways to make up for the difference in athleticism, just like they do in any of these now Power 4 or Big Ten games. It's tough. So that's a tricky situation that I'm very curious. It's a good question by you to see how they handle that. If you can't get pressure with the front 4, how much are you going to risk trying to create other avenues to go in there? And Rob Akey, since we've watched him for 6 years, he's aggressive. He likes to go get the quarterback. So my guess is, yeah, they're going to try and do everything they can to get in Altmaier's face and see if they can get him to make a couple of mistakes and help get their offense in some advantageous situations.
And what's the overall size of the DBs out there? Do they have some length? What type of coverage are they typically going to be using against the Illini?
Yeah, that's they really don't. They're more of 5'11", 6 foot. They've got one transfer and Akeem Snell. He's probably your biggest defensive back. You'll see him at corner. He's 6'3", but 180 pounds, a transfer out of Francis St. Francis. But other than that, they're 6 foot tall, and there's a couple of guys that are experienced, like a Dante Kent. He's certainly the leader, one of the permanent captains on this team. And then they really like this freshman, Jayon Jackson. He's a smaller guy. He's 5'10", 160, 170 pounds, but he's a playmaker. He loves to go out there and loves the game of football. So they're super excited about him. And then you got some thumpers in the back, and Elijah Ricard and Caleb Spann. They can go up there and they like to bring the hits and try and charge up the defense. So experienced guys in the back, but again, if there's not pressure up front, that's where CMU can get exposed. I mean, they've said it. Some of the offensive numbers the last couple of years have come through the passing game, and it looks like it's all in the DBs. But when the quarterback's got all kinds of time to throw, you understand it's really tough to cover for longer periods when it's already turned into an offensive game here in college football.
You feel sorry for the DBs because you can't cover. I don't care if you're Deion Sanders in his youth. You can't cover for 7 seconds. It's just not possible. The special teams, how Central Michigan set up there and kicking, punting, and then the return games.
Yeah, so I'll start with kicking. Tristan Matson is the place kicker. It's his second season. And Jim McElwain, to quote him, has said, well, he can kick it far. We just don't know where it's going to go sometimes.
So it's like my golf. It's like my golf game off the tee.
I think it's like most of our golf games off the tee. Yeah. So Tristan has a huge leg. I mean, he was 7 for 14, 6 for 12 rather last year, field goal wise. He kicked our program record, a 58-yarder in that win. I believe it was against Eastern Michigan last year. Remarkable. He made his first field goal, but he missed one this last week at FIU. So huge leg. He's looked great, but he's struggled. I think he's still settling in. Second year transfer from Arkansas State. Then at punter, David Chapoa. He's a first year transfer from East Carolina State. He punted really well in that first game against CCSU. He was back and forth. He had a couple that he didn't get a hold of, but there was a lot of wind down there, directly affecting depending on which direction you were going. When he was booting with the wind, he looked pretty good. So I don't think there's any great shakes there, but I think he's serviceable so far, and we've only seen a couple of games from him. So again, just still trying to figure out his identity on the punt return and kick return side. I know Dante Kent fumbled one this week. He was trying to make a play on a ball that they were yelling, Peter, Peter. The ball was bouncing. It was about to take an FIU hop, and they had him cut the field in half. So he tried to take it off the short hop and couldn't handle it. That was certainly a mistake, but last week he was great. He had his first punt return for touchdown, his first game returning kicks since high school, and he affected the field position in a positive way every time he touched it last week. So he's quick. He's been hungry to get back there, and I think, again, with the captain back there, got his mistake out of the way last week. I think that's certainly an advantage for CMU. And then the kick return is Marion Lukes. I mean, he's been back there for 3 years. He's shifty. He's fast. And CMU has always stressed special teams under Coach McElwain. And Keith Murphy is a guy that coached with him at Florida, is here, I think, in year 4. And they find ways to affect the game in special teams. They blocked like 7 kicks a couple of years ago. They've housed a couple of kickoffs and punts the last couple of years. They already got 2 in that first game. So I think that could be a strength this year. But again, just like a young roster, they're still trying to figure out their identity and who these playmakers are. But that is something certainly in a game where you expect to be less athletic than a Big Ten and top 25 team in Illinois, and you're on the road, hopefully in front of 60,000 for a second straight week. They would love to make some plays in special teams to help maybe shift the game a little bit in their direction.
Now, you've been the voice of the Chippewas for 15 or so years. What do you think the difference is for these teams in the MAC now that they have to live this new NIL world and open transfer portal, have you seen a difference for how a coach has to survive and build the roster at the MAC level?
Well, I think it's similar, honestly, to the Power Four teams where you get a guy, and if he excels or he doesn't do well, he might be there for a year, and then he's just I'm gonna go find something else. So that's the thing. Like you see it a ton in both basketball and football, where instead of looking forward maybe to having guys for 3 or 4 years, we've become accustomed to being happy if we get him for two and you wish him the best instead of going to the NFL or the NBA or wherever. It's okay. We'll see at Illinois or we'll see at Michigan or wherever they elect to go. We've had a couple of guys go to the SEC. So I think that's kind of become the landscape. And you look at it and go, well, it's only going to get tougher because these group of five schools that just don't have the money to back up and pay the NIL. And then you watch Northern Illinois go into Notre Dame and win last week. You watch Bowling Green and Scott Loeffler go toe to toe with Penn State in front of 100,000+ last Saturday. It's like the MAC has been doing this for years. I think last year was the first year since like the early 2000s that the MAC finally didn't win one game against the Big Ten. And they had multiple opportunities in close games. I think it was the Indiana game that got away from the MAC, but this has been happening for years. And it's not a knock on the Big Ten. It's just the MAC has good players. They have the ability to go in there and win these games. You can catch them on a bad Saturday, and you never know. So I would say I do think it's going to continue to get harder and harder as the money continues to grow for these Power Four teams. But the MAC's not going away. They just continue to find ways, and it's honestly been impressive to watch the small guy continue to stay in these games and provide these upsets that I know, unless you're the direct fan base, everybody loves to see them.
Illinois fans are obviously nervous because it would be so Illinois to go ahead and beat Kansas and then the next week lose to Central Michigan. I don't know if you're in the habit of predicting games, but what are you looking for in this game and how do you see it playing out if just based on your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so many of these games where again, CMU has lost a ton to the Big Ten, but they've found ways to stay in games, and it's usually more the latter than the former, where they're in game. I mean, they were in Happy Valley and they were a little turnover happy. No pun intended there a couple of years ago. That was a close game. It was a close game into the third quarter against both Michigan State and Notre Dame last year. So you never write it off. It's a perfect spot. It is the absolute perfect spot. Illinois is coming off, obviously, their best win in the Brett Bielema era. They've beaten a top 25 team. They're finishing three straight at home before they go take on a really good Nebraska team for their first road test. And they're looking at that film going, 52 points, 6 turnovers, and 5 interceptions. Who the heck is this Central Michigan team coming in on the road? So I think it's a perfect underdog mentality role that CMU has always taken to come in here and compete. I'm not saying they're going to win, but more times than not, CMU comes in, they look respectable. They do play hard. I think you guys will be impressed with their grit and their attitude. So I wouldn't be surprised if I think the spread is maybe around 3 touchdowns or something like that, depending on where the line moves. I
Right.
wouldn't be surprised to see CMU keep it within that or keep it close. But right now, it's unproven. Through 2 weeks, I can't tell you after you go on the road one time against a program that has struggled that you're just automatically going to turn it around. And for 4 quarters, you can go toe to toe with a team that just played a great game defensively. They found a way to win an uglier game against a Kansas team that really took it to you guys last year. It's an impressive turnaround. So I really hope that CMU puts out a better performance. If they do, I think they can give Illinois a tough battle. But in the end, I know the Illini, they're certainly going to be tough to beat at home.
This is one that scares Illini fans. At the same time, if you want to have a bowl bound team, you have to close the door and get things done when you're supposed to. That's the thing I've always thought about the best coaches, and they rarely get much accolades for this. But if you look at the great coaches of all time, They beat the teams they're supposed to beat. And nobody cares about that because you're supposed to beat them. But when you don't, then you end up in those weird positions that you see Marcus Freeman dealing with, let's say right now in up in South Bend, where he's got to answer an awful lot of questions regarding that.
It's a lose-lose for Brett Bielema in Illinois this week because you're supposed to win. You better win. If you don't win, or if you win close, what are you doing? And for CMU, you're playing with house money, so you can understand they don't have any pressure. Why some of these MAC teams come in and they compete, and sometimes they win. But again, this is I think this is a different Illinois team than a lot of people thought when they looked at this on the schedule last year, going, well, CMU's plucked off a Purdue. They've plucked off an Iowa. They've beaten Indiana. They've knocked off Michigan State 3 times. I mean, they've been no stranger to beating Big Ten teams. But the last time CMU beat a Big Ten team, you got to go back to 2014. So it's been a decade. And again, this isn't your old school Illinois team that over the last 10, 20 years people have got accustomed to. This looks like the real deal this year.
And Illinois fans are still mad for the MAC giving us Tim Beckman. So we're still not over that, just to let you know. Any other closing comments? I may not have asked you every question you thought I was going to.
No, I think I'm just excited for this game. I mean, again, for you guys, for CMU, I hope there's no injuries because it's one of those non-conference games. It's really cool. It's the first ever meeting, which is so weird because you guys are right in the heart of Big Ten Midwest country, and so is CMU. And again, I know Illinois fans don't know as much about CMU, but we are a rich program in the Mid-American Conference for football. So to be able to come down and celebrate the 100th year at Memorial Stadium and be there on homecoming, I'm really looking forward to seeing it. And again, I'm hoping the Chippewas can at least play well and give you guys somewhat of a good game because I truly do think this is a much better team than what they showed last week. And it shows too. And if you look back at the pattern of the 2019 season, they lost, I think it was 73 or 63 to nothing at Wisconsin in like week 2, maybe it was 61-0. And then you go to 2021, they finished the season winning 5 games in a row and then winning the Sun Bowl, and beating Western Michigan, their rival. So traditionally under Coach Mack, it's been a little bit of a slower start to figure out their identity. And this is a team that's got pieces. They seem tight knit. They've been saying the right things. I know that doesn't always lead to victories, but I do think this is a respectable program in the MAC, even though they were selected 8th. So if I were Illinois and you guys win this game handily and CMU doesn't turn it over 6 times and they play decent, I would feel like it's a pretty good win. And I know it's just a MAC game and you got Nebraska next and Kansas was the top 25 team, but I really hope CMU plays their best and they give you guys a good football game because our program is been traditionally pretty good up here. And I think it's going to be a fun one to come down there and see what this game looks like.
Oh, well, we really appreciate it. I think there's plenty of people at Illinois who respect the MAC, understand the threat that they represent on a Saturday afternoon. And we're hopeful that the Illini will show up in a good mind frame to take it to the Chippewas. But thank you so much, folks. That's Adam Jaksa, and he's the voice of the Chippewas. It was really kind of him to come and talk to us a little bit about what is going on with the Chippewa team. Thank you so much, sir.
You got it. Thank you.
Red Grange wasn't just a football player. He was a legend. Discover the untold story of Illini great Red Grange in a new novel by Doug Vilhard called The Golden Age of Red. This captivating book takes you back to the 1920s when a humble young Illinois player transformed into the galloping ghost and electrified the nation. Get your copy of The Golden Age of Red by Doug Vilhard today. Available on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
Thanks so much to tuning in to Eye on the Illini. We really appreciate Adam Jaksa for coming on. It's fantastic when you can get somebody who's the voice of one of the teams who has the time to come on and do that. That's why we have Brian Barnhart on so often on the Illini Guys Sports Spectacular. But he gave us a primer on what's going on. Let's hope Central Michigan comes in and the Illini are ready to play and make short work in the first half so that they don't hang around and get some confidence. We saw last week, you don't want to play a 4-quarter game with a MAC team. It's just not worth it. Nobody in the Big Ten wins when that happens. If you've enjoyed what you've heard or watched here today, please go to IlliniGuys.com, 27 cents a day, and you get all the stories, you get all the insider information, you get things ahead of time, and you have the opportunity to go to our message boards where you can talk to Brad, Larry, Matt, Ked, myself. You can have conversations with Illini fans who are around the world. You can talk Illini sports, and it's a lot more fun when you have coaches like Brett Bielema, Brad Underwood, and Shauna Green, along with people like Mike Small, et cetera. When the Illini are winning, those message boards are fantastic. They're almost addictive. And we also have our game room, which you can go in real time and feel the agony of other Illini fans as the game is actually playing out in front of them. But we'd love to have more people. We're trying to create a community where people enjoy Illini sports and they can have fun. With that, we will be back later this week. But until then, go Illini.